to the Jay and Thomas podcast. This is episode 3, title to be included at a later date. Actually, that'd probably be a pretty good title. But first things first, Dad, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going real good. It's
Excellent.
nice down here. Weather's good.
Yeah,
Nice outside.
what's that like where it's 85 degrees every day and the sun's always shining?
We're moving into their winter time.
Mm,
Actually, January, February, March, and April are summertime,
okay.
and now we're moving into their winter. So at night we're experiencing a little bit cooler weather, which to us, cool is, you know, cool if you're from Tennessee is, below 30
Sure.
or below 35. But down here, cool to them is in the 60s. So
Ah, there you
it's
go.
pretty pleasant. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty pleasant.
it seems like it. I would hate to figure out what their deep freeze is. 50 something degrees or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, I don't have many winter clothes with me. So, and they don't sell them down here. So,
Well, luckily our family, we're normally pretty well insulated, so we should be okay there.
yeah, and hot natured.
Yeah, let me tell you, can't wait to
Yeah.
hear what the summer's like. But all right, so the first topic that we wanted to go over today was what sacrifices has your generation made, and what trauma have you lived through globally? And so in this, you gave me a few notes to say, okay, so Thomas's parents, so your parents, the Great Depression, World War One, World War Two, and the Korean War were the big notables for you. My parents, i.e., you, were Vietnam, Desert Storm, 9/11, Operation Iraqi Freedom, currently in Afghanistan. Seems like what's going on there. They still haven't pulled the troops out from what I'm aware of. So tell me a little bit about your sacrifices before I hop in and tell you what what me and the boys have to currently go through.
Well, when I started thinking about it, I thought, the generation, the kids, I call them the kids nowadays, or the children. I try not to call them kids because that's a small billy goat. But the children nowadays, I don't think that they've sacrificed. I think that they've had most things. I don't want to say handed to them, but we started working early. Our parents, I think our parents messed a lot of this up for us. Maybe not everybody's parents, but my parents, they worked all the time, and but they had to learn how to budget money and save money and not live beyond their means and stuff. They didn't spend, as far as I saw, they didn't spend every dime they made. When I when I was left home and was married with children, we tried not to spend every dime that we made. We didn't do a lot of saving. Some people are better at managing money than others. I think they should put other than bookkeeping and accounting,
Right.
which is in high school. I'm sure it's probably a elective college course, but I think they should teach how to save money and stuff. But
Sure.
that's in finances. We when I say suffered a trauma globally,
Mm-hmm.
9/11 was huge. Desert Storm was huge. I've got buddies that went Iraqi Freedom. I've got buddies at Desert Storm. I've got buddies that went to Vietnam. I mean, we felt that, and America embraced that. So I feel like that your generation, early 30s, what have y'all endured, or how have you, what have you had traumatic that made the generation come together? I'm 67, so we've had a lot of things go on in my lifetime where America had to come together, and we had to be as one and help each other. And I don't see the generation today, I guess, is thankful for what they have. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Matt, you tell me.
Okay. So Good insight there. And I would understand, and it seems like a common trend where each generation, the one after it, are a bunch of lazy scumbags, and that's not being mean. I'm just saying that's kind of the thought
Right, right.
process. And then the
Sure.
generation before it, like we would think for either our parents, and actually you and me, there is a generational gap in between there. It's not just one to one, right? Like there actually is a generation in between, like millennials versus baby boomers. There's kind of the forgotten folks who are kind of like
Right,
Melissa's age a little bit, right in their
right.
40s and whatnot. But and then of course we're saying, okay, well, of course, I'm sure everyone on here who's listening, and you yourself, I'm sure you've heard the phrase "Okay, boomer," right? Let's appease the boomer because they just need to sit in timeout. They've screwed things up enough. For the rest of us, which was something that I think that happens all the time, no matter what the generation is. Okay, so
Okay.
because I could definitely see where if you were younger, and then air quotes the greatest generation, the ones who came out of World War II and World War One, who defended the world from the axis of evil and Nazis and whatnot. Then you have the generation that comes right after them, and it's like, well, what the hell have you all done? You know what I'm saying? Now I understand the
Right.
kids had to fight a potential war or a war that was potentially a losing fight, and it was done incredibly poorly, like Vietnam. Understandable, right? Desert Storm kind of thing, understandable. So when we say 9/11, I was in, I believe it was seventh or eighth grade in second period, and we turned on the old television because we had heard that a plane had crashed into a tower. Okay. And it was a scenario where, I mean, what age are you most impressionable? I'm not 100% sure, but I definitely know that middle school shaped a lot of how I am as a person today. So when you say that your generation went through it, well, yeah, you went through it. Some of us were molded by it, okay?
Okay.
Because we then now have the veil has been lifted. Something that really always concerns me about children is the veil of innocence goes away, right? So anybody younger than me, or basically anybody, where that veil of innocence is gone very quickly, it, it hurts my soul. So in this case, where we had the instance of the second plane comes, right, and then wait a minute, is the plane coming for the building I'm in next? We don't know, right?
Right. Right.
Parents came and got their kids. Everybody huddled in their houses, tried to understand what was going on. And I understand for parents it was tough, and some, 3,300 or however many people of us died in that, which, yes, that's very tragic. And for the kids, we're vulnerable, no matter the age. And they don't know, are we going to be next? Is the next flight my dad takes his last one? So when you say, yeah, that didn't bring us together and whatnot, well, like Bane says in Batman, you know, you were friend to the darkness or whatever. Well, it's like, well, he was molded by it. He grew up there. So
Right.
the 9/11 one doesn't ring super hard for me in terms of you guys, yes, did go through it, but we were kind of shaped by it. And Iraqi freedom. I have friends who went into the military and they went over there. You know what I'm saying? It's gone on long enough to where, I have people. Luckily, everyone's made it back. My import manager, so my manager, he's a Marine. He was over there. He was in Afghanistan, Iraq, and those places, and he had to deal with it. So and he's my age, or actually maybe a year younger than me. So we fought that war. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And then now let's fast forward a little bit to the notes that I have and kind of like what I like to say me and the boys went through. So the recession of 2008. That's on y'all, but we are now having to still live through the fallout of that. So we definitely appreciate it. Iraqi freedom still, or the Afghanistan still in it, still over there. Me and the boys and even younger guys who are far better people than us, went in to serve. They're getting over there, right? this thing called the pandemic. To people who are younger than myself, or even my generation and maybe a little bit younger than me, that, like, this is reshaping the world, right? It kind of luckily skipped over that 100-year gap from the Spanish flu, and then now the pandemic. It's happened. Has that brought us together? I think it did for a time. Try its damnedest to make us one place to live because we had a common enemy to fight. It's a huge trope in movies, right, where the bad guy, or what you perceive as the bad guy, and the hero have to come together and then battle a greater evil, right? So that's something that definitely has, air quotes, brought some of us together, some of us not, but in the scheme of things, it did say, wait a minute, there's a commonality, human survival, right?
Okay.
And that's definitely something globally that we've gone through. The riots over this past year and a half, right? People are just tearing things up left and right for whatever cause they think is worthy. That's something where I know you all had riots as well, and I know it was pretty terrifying, right? I mean, you had people shooting folks off of the top of rooftops back in the day, back in Detroit and whatnot. I've heard stories about that. That's just absolutely wild. We grew up with the internet, algorithms, and social media. So, like we kind of hit on last time, the camera's always rolling. Well, the algorithms are always collecting, whether or not it be from your phone, your computer, your television, like your bills. You're being targeted all the time for algorithms for certain ads or certain little points where they are always watching and they're always listening. And it's a scenario where either we become so desensitized to it that we just don't care anymore, or it's something that people are hiding so well and it's so intrusive that we're just kind of turning a blind eye because we would rather sacrifice for the technology that we've been presented, right? And several of us, especially, my generation and whatnot, coming up with these products and devices and stuff like that, or helping further their cause and whatnot. Another thing too, skyrocketing college tuition. Rates are compounded with student loan debt, right? And then the tuition keeps going up because from what my understanding is, they either have the GI Bill or they have more administration costs because they get their money from the government in a lot of ways based on how much staffing they have, right? So if it's a small school, then they don't get as much. Well, let's just kick up the price and then we're going to have more employees, but they're not nearly as many professors. They might have something to do with some of that silliness. But another thing too is credit scores. That's something that we've gone through globally, at least by that I mean in America, because I don't know of any other country that does this. Credit scores came
Right.
about in the
Right.
1980s. Okay, well, before that, there wasn't any credit scores, or that I'm aware of, or it wasn't the same thing as like it is today, where it determines your ability to function. Okay,
Right. Okay.
so that's something that is pretty wild that we didn't come up with. That's not on us, but it was definitely thrust upon us. Another thing that we're going through as well is wage stagnation. Okay, so why could the boomer generation and maybe a little bit before and after, so you or your parents could afford to support, in many cases, a wife, two kids, a house, two cars, a maid working 40 hours a week, assembling some arbitrary product, when nowadays making slightly above minimum wage, working 50 to 60 hours a week, can barely afford rent, insurance for a car that they may have just recently paid off or are in the process of doing so, and etc. That's something that we're having to fight as well right now. And that's something that is kind of getting us to come together, like we've seen. Or just food places in general, or even just shitty places to work. They're just not doing it. We've seen that something needs to change. So the sacrifices that we made are putting up with the older generation to try to figure out how to squeeze blood from the younger stones. And that's the reason that millennials are considered one of the most, if not the most, jaded generation in history. That's not to say that we're ungrateful for what we have, as we're in the top percent of the world in terms of abject poverty. I'm one of the richest men alive compared to the 8 billion other people that exist in the world. So it's not something about being ungrateful or not knowing what we have, but there still are the struggles. But it's nowhere near the folks back in the day when people are now saying millennials feel entitled or are called lazy, when certain generations were piggybacking off of the greatest generation. So that's kind of what me and the boys are going through, as I say. But it's a scenario where I think right now, right back to the camera thing, right? It's being thrust upon you a lot more because people have access to give their opinions or to give you their scenario, where people want to fight for this and do that. Well, 30 years ago, you wouldn't know that there is some congressperson in another state that gets on whatever platform it would have been on back then, i.e., the town square, because they just didn't have it. And obviously, the newspaper wouldn't write about it, or wouldn't be on TV unless it was national newsworthy. So I
Right.
think that's kind of bringing it in to, oh, people seem ungrateful. That's how it always is, right? Your
Right.
generation
Right.
before you, it was almost horses to cars, right? You aren't that far away from generational divides like that. And it's a scenario: did everyone really appreciate their cars?
I rode on a streetcar. I rode on buses.
Right? So it's a scenario where, and also you said you had to start working early. I got a job at 16. You got a job at 16. You chose to leave home. Okay. I
Right.
did not. Or there are several others did not. Now, I know a lot of people don't have a choice, and I'm very fortunate, but you also made that choice,
Right.
right?
I
So
did. I did.
when it's we start working early, I know people who started working at 14, 13, under the table. They didn't have any benefits or anything like that. And a lot of people have had it harder than us. So it's like, are we really, are several of us really ungrateful? Or does it just seem like we're jaded because now you can get it, like you can see what people are trying to say because you have access to it, access to silly memes online or Twitter articles or whatever, and it's like, hey, like, look at this tweet that somebody said, like, look at this dummy, they got the world by the balls. And it's like, well, yeah, they do, but everyone's struggle is different. So,
Right. Okay.
but it's a scenario that we've gone through a lot, and are some things our fault? 100%. But is it all our fault? No. And we're doing what we can to try to remedy things the best way we can and just be. Do you know what first world poor is?
I do not.
So first world poor, from what I understand, is being able to like afford phone, a cheap ass car, barely rent, and that's it. Right? Like you have your electronics, you have your microwave, your fridge, whatever in your apartment or whatever wherever you're at, but you can't save any money or not a whole lot of it at one time. You don't have money for emergencies. That's a big thing. The I've seen the meme recently. The healthcare plan in America is "don't get sick," stuff like that. But so there's a scenario where, I mean,
That's good.
yeah, everyone's struggle is different, but the system, is it rigged against us because of what other generations have done? I don't think it's exactly even or fair. But then again, that's your whole point, right? Is
Right. Right.
ungratefulness or maybe something's unfair or something like that. But then again, you have to understand life's not fair. And I understand I'm one of the luckiest people around. And I'd say you're pretty lucky as yourself based on just
Oh,
sitting there,
absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
it's something where, should we try to send a better message as millennials to say we know what we have, but but it can get better.
Life is good, but it can be better.
So that's that topic. Unless you have more to say about it.
No, you brought up a lot of good points, a lot of valid points, stuff that I didn't really consider. that
Well,
y'all went through.
and that's the
But
thing, right? Is I mean, we went through it and kind of. I don't want to say you all didn't go through it too. I mean, like look at the pandemic, for example. Like look at the statistics of who perished more based on age, weight, blah blah blah. Like, oh well, it was obviously your generation, right? So that's kind of like, hey, we understand it definitely changed us all, and we all are affected, just albeit maybe slightly differently in terms of severity. So,
right, right.
but
Well, we might have needed to thin out the herd.
yeah, that is well. Hey, if that was the goal, then we're doing it to it. That kind of reminds me of the Bill Gates thing he was talking about in his TED talk that I saw recently on a on another show that said Bill Gates stated that we can clear out like 500,000 or 1,000,000 with vaccines. He said it wrong, but it makes it sound like he wants to kill people. And of
Right,
course,
right.
I don't think that's the case, but he also, coupled that in with birth control as well. Because people, at least a lot of people that I've seen, vehemently think that overpopulation is a thing. So certain people see like these birthing rate declines as that's a good thing.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, there's a difference in like killing the folks who are around
Right, right.
and potentially stopping certain people from becoming. So, but yeah, so that
That makes sense.
definitely wild. The next thing we got going on here, and that kind of goes into the camera's always on, and don't forget it.
Right.
Is so several news feeds that you're looking at. I got to hop back on social media here in the near future so we can send out our silly message of shenanigans is what the message is hashtag shenanigans, where school boards meetings have erupted into firing or resignations of the entire board. I did not see a whole lot of things like that. I have seen where they did not know they were publicly broadcasting and they said some shady stuff and may have stuck their foot in their proverbial mouth. I forgot what school that was in, but so the question is, there is a little bit of a clarifying question, right? Is if they're resigning or is the whole board there, do they then proceed to elect new members right on the spot?
Yes.
So like
That's what
right
I
there.
saw. I saw three different scenarios where the school board meetings erupted into we want our children back in school
Sure.
and now without a mask. And the school board is, well, no, no, we're not taking no for an answer. Kids are going back to school, and that's how it is. And they were starting to buck, and I don't know if there was going to be if there's going to be an altercation or not. But these three different scenarios, and I don't recall the cities that they were in, the school board just got up and walked out, and
Oh
so they
wow.
just proceeded to call. They brought themselves to order, called themselves
Sure.
nominated people and got a second for the nomination, and Robert's Rules of Orders went along, and you know,
Wow.
they
Okay.
elected a new school board right there on the spot, and the other people were just out.
Okay
So
then.
now they might be able to get something accomplished. I mean, the kids are, it, well, it's you don't. I don't want to, put a burr under anybody's saddle. It's been a year.
Okay.
It's been a year.
It's been a year
We
and some
should,
months.
yeah, we should be done with this. We can put a man on the moon. I mean, really?
You should have seen the
Really?
technology that we did that with and the programming that took.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you put a spaceship on Mars and you got a little, Land Rover running around up there, whatever. Yeah. So we should be finished with this. I just find it hard to, swallow, I guess, the stuff that they're trying to put out there. We've got too much technology, and we're too well advanced or far advanced for this. They
Okay.
I got a phone call this morning. The guy said, "Hey, man, are you interested in getting the vaccine?" And I said, "Why?" They said, "Well, down here in Ecuador, everybody that's over 65 are going to give them the vaccine."
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah, I don't mind that.
I want to say it's Johnson and Johnson.
Oh, okay.
It's a
I might
two
be
shot.
against that.
Well, it's a two-shot deal, and I said, "Well,
Sure.
okay, what's going to change?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "What's going to change if I get the vaccine?"
Yeah.
Well, I said, "No, thanks, but no thanks."
So
And so I,
what you're asking is, I'm taking preventative measures. Now, how is my life going to be altered back to air quotes what it would have been? Like, what functions can I go to? Where can I travel to?
yes,
How many people can
yes.
be in a place? So,
Everybody here wears a mask.
okay, sure.
Outdoors, indoors,
Yeah, that's fine.
100% unless they're drinking or eating, sitting at a table. Everyone here has a mask on,
Yeah, I could see that.
it just I don't get it. I don't get it when you're outside. It's 80 degrees, ocean breeze,
Okay,
and you want me to put a mask on? No, no, I'm not going to. So I try not to wear one the least amount of time that I can. So,
that's
but
fine. Well, all right. So let's hit on the topic or hit on the point of it's been a year and change. We can fly to freaking Mars and pilot a helicopter, right? So
right.
let's think about it like this. Think for a second. Have you ever in your entire life had a good amount of control? And it can be over a thing, a person, a situation, anything like that.
Not absolute.
Okay, so now think about it like this. Let's say the scenario that you may have come up with where you may have had probably the most control. Did it feel good to let it go? Or when you potentially lost it again, had control of a situation, a person, what a thing, whatever, and then lost it, how'd that feel?
Sometimes a relief.
Sometimes, but if you're nefarious or if you think that you had somebody, something, some situation's best interest, okay, would you ever want to relinquish it?
Well, I understand it's all about power.
To a
I'm not a
degree, I would
power
say.
guy, so I don't have to. It doesn't.
Yes,
I don't think
amazingly
like
enough.
that.
Well, right. The Dardens are not, power hungry folk, but we can definitely think like that, okay? And try to thrust ourselves into those people's shoes and to say, if I had you in your house and you had to rely on me and I was a power hungry or potentially even like I might be thinking, hey, I might have your best interest at heart. Listen to me. Let's do this, yada, yada. You can change the landscape of things, right? This pandemic has now shown people, air quotes, the way, because they're no longer going to work for slave wages or they're not going to work for minimum wage, whatever the heck that was that hasn't changed in like 40 something years when every other cost has gone up, right? So it's changed things and now like the ball's rolling and certain things are going to stay the way it is and then certain things are not. Like the mask thing in general, that's like, so you have like positive and negative rights, okay? Where one of my rights is not going to affect yours at all. But so in this mask scenario, I'm going to look more of that up and put a little info thing on the screen of like, this is what a positive right is, this is what a negative right is, and then kind of go through that on a little info thing. But them wearing a mask, it doesn't affect you, right? So is it just peer pressure? Do you feel bad because they're wearing one and you're not? Because unless someone asks you to do it, and like like I'm assuming you don't have to technically do it, what's the big deal? If they can stand it in the 80-degree weather, then why not just let them do it and move on?
Okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, you feel very passionate about it, but I want to know, like, hey, all these people are wearing masks. I'm not. It's like, well, did they ask you to? If they didn't, and you don't have to wear one, then let them wear one forever. It'd be like going to an Asian country because several of them wear masks because of the smog and all that stuff.
Yeah, nobody has said put one on, but if I get on a bus, I wear one.
Sure.
I don't wear one in the taxi when I get in there. The driver has one on, but I don't wear one when I get in the taxi. And
Yeah.
it's not that I don't respect the driver. They've got the plexiglass shield and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. We can go back and forth with the COVID and the mask and all that kind of stuff all night.
Sure.
I just think it's interesting that they're trying to make the kids wear a mask and the adults are tired of it and they've started taking over school boards. And that's good because you
that stuff
start
is
in the
wild.
community.
Right.
You start in the community, you start locally, and then you move on up, your levels of government
Sure.
until you get to where you need to be and start pushing some people out the door or
Right.
off the ledge or out the window or wherever you need to push them.
Well, and like, we mentioned earlier, it's changing things. The entire like landscape is changing to a degree, and how people think and what will tolerate, right? I mean, that kind of harkens back to the riots we spoke on earlier, or that I talked about, because I mean, that was a freaking powder keg ready to go, man, because you had people in your houses for months, and it's just like throwing the match on or throwing the match on the barrel. It just
Right.
explodes,
Sure.
right? And people were like, I don't want to say they were going stir crazy or just looking for the opportunity to get out of the house and go nuts, but I mean, it's a scenario where the game has been changed to a degree.
It was every man for himself.
To a degree, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Sure.
Because when I lived when Dr. King was shot in Memphis.
That is wild, man.
You want to see riots? I mean, there was armed military on the streets
Yeah.
in Memphis to enforce those curfews.
Good Lord.
Your Uncle Bob was on the street in Memphis, armed military,
Yeah.
to enforce those curfews. So
Holy
I understand rioting and burning and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
April 1968.
Well, I mean, then,
So-
hey, man, you get it. You understand, right? So the riots,
absolutely.
lockdowns, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
The face of the nation changing, right, over time, and it goes and goes and goes, and we're gonna live.
It was pretty
live with the
interesting down
fallout.
here. The lockdown here is going to go till the 20th, which is a Thursday.
Okay.
We've been having weekend lockdowns like you and I've discussed from Friday night, 8 o'clock till Monday morning at
Sure.
5 a.m. So we decided to walk down to the beach on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the police were riding down the beach on 2 4-wheelers telling everybody to get off the beach.
Oh, there you go.
Well, that's a biatch on the beach, when the police tell you to get off the beach. Well, it was
Right.
interesting because you could look down the beach and people were walking off the beach, and then when the police would go by, they were walking back out. And their pop-ups or
Right.
walking. I mean,
Yeah,
they would-
yeah.
They, it's like they'd wave and say, "Okay, yeah, sure," and
It's
then they
like-
drive on to tell
yeah.
somebody else. We
Oh,
played
my goodness.
we played the no comprende card,
Oh,
and they
yeah,
just
yeah.
kept driving on their 4-wheelers. It was more or less, I think, just to tell people that they needed, and we weren't close. It was just 2 of us. We weren't
Yeah.
close, other than our dogs chasing the policeman.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Chasing
Chasing the
that
4-wheelers.
reminds
Yeah.
me of it's like the game on, from Wayne's World, and they get their stuff and put it back out in the street, and then they're like, oh, game off, car,
Yeah,
and they
that's
leave
it.
and
So
come back.
that's what
and stuff.
everybody did. They got off the beach and walked about 10 feet, and the
Yeah.
guys drove on by.
They just
They
walk
never
back
came
out.
back by again.
Wow.
Never came back by again. We stayed out there about 2 hours and
Sure.
then rolled back in because we were after a couple hours in that sunshine.
Okay, I got you.
We were crispy.
Yeah, I bet you were like a rotisserie chicken,
Yeah.
just going.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes, sir.
that is wild. And hey,
It was interesting. So we've got one more weekend.
sure.
They completely screwed up Mother's Day, but
So they celebrate Mother's Day down there.
oh yeah, we were locked down. Mother's Day was last Sunday. We were locked down till Monday to Monday morning at 5 o'clock.
That's kind of wild.
So,
Well,
yeah, it was interesting.
it said something, right? So,
Yes.
well, I do think that what they did in terms of maintaining order in those scenarios with school boards and whatnot is being changed and altered. However, I have some friends who are teachers, right? And I'm sure the school boards are not just filled with superintendents. I'm sure several of them are educators or were at one point in time, and they kind of understand what's going on to a degree. However, I don't know if any of them are medically trained and want kids in mask or want this or that or the other. But the one thing you don't want to see, okay, is, I mean, could you imagine? Okay, say it's back in middle school, right? And then, you're doing your thing and you're one of the teachers, or I'm sorry, one of the parents who said, "I want my son to go back to school, no masks, screw that. This is dumb. Get them all back into school and into classes and all that." Okay. A month goes by and that scenario has happened. Well, then your son gets COVID. Okay, COVID-19 or even the strain that might be deadlier, might be more potent against vaccines or whatever. Okay, well, now what?
Chances of that happening are so, I would roll the dice,
Okay.
because chances of that happening are so minimal or unlikely that I don't see it.
Well,
I mean, I just don't. I don't see it. I don't.
well, luckily I'm older now and you don't have to worry about that. But think about what you just said. I will roll the dice on my kid's safety.
Yes.
Okay, that's very important
Yes.
because
Yes.
that will allow for others, if we start getting comment sections or whatever, to say, well, you would risk the life of your kid for something very arbitrary, so your opinion is now becoming invalidated. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
My child could get hit crossing the street
Sure.
on the way to school because nobody's paying attention when they drive.
Well,
Nobody is.
well, let me ask you. Well, let me
Nobody.
ask this.
Nobody is paying attention when they drive.
That's fine. Do you
So
buckle up in the car?
every time.
Okay. You don't have to.
Every time. Well, my child doesn't have to be run over either.
Well,
In a school zone with someone speeding on the phone or texting and driving. Oh, we don't want to go down that road. Get it? That road? Okay, never mind.
God. So the point is, you do take precautions on things, right? But for whatever reason,
Yes.
if something is angled a certain way, you'll balk.
It's been over a year.
Yeah, but you still buckle up, and you've been alive for 68 years or 60 million years.
More like 60 million.
Yeah.
BC. BC, yeah.
You're part of the Jurassic period or whatever.
Yeah, I
So,
was.
or and I know you don't want to, but wear a helmet on a motorcycle or buckle up or not eat expired food or whatever. It's just that comment is loaded. Okay, I just
Absolutely it is.
just be mindful
Absolutely.
that comment is
Absolutely.
loaded, and you are opening yourself
Absolutely.
up for the proverbial and literal crusade of that. So,
Okay.
but
Okay.
we all well, hey, and another thing too.
Send them back to school and everybody get off their ass and go to work.
I was gonna say another Darden thing too is we ain't gonna walk away from a fight. So if
That's right.
I understand
That's exactly
if you
right.
want to battle, man, go for it, dude. So
That's right.
that's fantastic. Hey, ain't nothing wrong with that. I don't mind that. You're old enough to know to where to punch or where to stab or where to shoot or whatever. Oh wait, that's right. You can't shoot because you're in Ecuador.
That's right. No guns.
No guns.
No guns.
That's a tough one. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the AR-15 out this weekend for a spin just because I can.
So only the police and the security people.
I was going to
They're
say the private security
trained
who
to-
have like the MP5s and like the
Yeah,
40
yeah,
round clip. Yeah.
Your private security and your police
Sure.
are the only ones that have firearms here. So,
Silliness. Well, moving away from the Brovid, okay, because some people call it the Brovid because it did some things for us that we like and will never change, like working from home. So, student loan forgiveness. You asked me, what are my thoughts on this? So there is a segment that a popular YouTuber slash political person has, Steven Crowder. It says, change my mind. Okay. He invites people to come up to him and talk to him about student loans, not student loans, topics to change his mind, right?
Okay.
So the reason why I bring that up is because my mind has been changed based on either new experiences, facts, or evidence, whatever you want to call it, that student loans, in this case, okay, originally, I was definitely on the side of no forgiveness for any reason. You took the loans out yourself. No one suggested it to you at all. Everyone told you all the consequences. Everyone said that college would have, no detriment on your future based on the 80 grand you're gonna borrow, that no one's telling you that it's a full 80 grand because you sign up when you have no debt and you don't know what debt is. I was one of those folks who
Right.
was, hey, I'm working to pay off the loans. I had some help and I'm very grateful for that. And I thought it was, and that there's an insane interest rate here that starts accruing while you take the loans out, but you're in school. But hey, interest is still happening. And that's like the first, 10 payments or whatever is back to the interest to make a $60,000 ride through a 4-year college, which that now is probably on the lower end of things, that turns into an $80,000 plus bill that takes 10 to 20 years of your life. Because it just
Right.
does.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So now understand that this is optional. You don't have to take out the loan. You don't
They
take out
make it so
loans.
easy, though. They make it so easy.
So,
Just sign right here.
so,
Sign
however,
here.
what is not understood is that when you take out a loan, it is that student loans cannot be swept away like many other things can through bankruptcy. This is by design. Okay. Now, that's not to
Right.
say the goal definitely doesn't need to be get your degree and then say, oops, I can't pay off my loans, go bankrupt, air quotes, and then get out scot-free, right? Because to several people, including myself to a degree, college was definitely a ride. It was a ride of, did I get a better education? To a degree, no pun intended. But there was also some playtime there. It was kind of never land for a bit. It was like, hey, we went off to, boarding school or whatever, and then just got to chill with my homies, meet girls, go out to parties, do this, but also make great relationships,
Right.
do school projects, intern for the job that I got, right? I interned there while I was in school and then got the job afterwards. So it definitely does have its merits. But so it's not the goal for everybody to get their degree and then bounce and then not want to pay because they don't have the money to pay back the student loans and then get it out with bankruptcy. That's not the goal, right? And that's not why they didn't let you do it through bankruptcy. But undue hardship is very hard to prove, and also our parents were fed some insane propaganda that college was the golden ticket to a chance at the old school American dream, when it simply is a way for the institutions to rob your future self because there are no guarantees of jobs afterwards, because that's not how it's designed. And some great jobs slash careers out there do not require degrees. You could go to potentially vocational schools or have apprenticeships be happening and have merits that many scoff at nowadays for whatever reason. No one wants to be a plumber or an electrician. Or those with degrees say, ugh, work with my hands. What is that? And the ride through school was excellent and a memorable experience, but I will profess until the end of time for folks not to take out student loans if they want to go to school. I have a family member who I thought I was on my soapbox enough and that they were not going to take out student loans, and yet they did. And it's a scenario that I would have even paid money out of my pocket and told them, just wait a beat before you go back and I will help you pay for it, because it's not worth it. It's not worth
Right.
it.
Right.
It's ridiculous. Nowadays, that was my first stance, was no, no forgiveness. And I've seen people say, hey, I didn't take vacations. I worked overtime. I paid for my, son or daughter's schooling. You're going to pay back student loans for people who sat on their ass and got their degrees. Okay. Well, now I'm on the let's forgive things train. Okay, so my mind's been changed. That's why I talked about the change my mind thing with Stephen Crowder. It has been changed, and one of the reasons it has been changed is there was an example. Just because someone had a hardship before you doesn't mean that you should have it just as hard as them, right? So let's look at it like this. And I forget the exact example, but it's a scenario where it's gotten pretty funny because we said, or I've seen something that's akin to, this is not exact quoting, I'll paraphrase here, where, oh, well, I got the polio vaccine, but you should go ahead and get polio. Well, it's like, well, things of that nature where we're going to make things harder just for that particular purpose. Now, I understand taxpayers are going to have to pay that money off. I don't know how else that's going to happen. The government it's going to be a pretty wild thing for the government to either forgive, $10,000, $50,000, whatever it's going to be, whatever it is, Grandpa Joe, gets for us. But I can't remember the exact example, but someone I've been told, parents everywhere, is that it was an easier situation for their kids and it would make it easier for them. I paid off roughly $67,000 in student loans, $700 a month for the past 8 years or so.
Damn.
And I think that's plenty. Okay. So that's enough. And I've never been able to drive my Phantom Mercedes, but it'll be a godsend when I'm finally able to stop paying for it. Okay. So yeah, we've paid enough. And it's a scenario where I think a smaller amount of forgiveness is more applicable. Now, granted, I fall into that category because underwater basket weaving, for somebody who just got out of grad school with $80,000, they're going to have $50,000 of it repaid. I think that's a little bit different, but to a degree, I don't think that someone else's hardship needs to be compared to to everyone else's, if that makes sense. Where,
Okay.
why do these folks have to have it harder when it doesn't need to be that way? Now, with that being said, student loan also goes into free college. Well, there are several places throughout the world that have it. I'm not necessarily on board with that either, but I do think it can definitely be cheaper. You can get several courses online for MIT. I mean, one of the greatest schools ever, right? You can just go online and get their courses. A lot of the things that they're doing nowadays is they're nickel and diming you with, like in school, with, textbooks where teachers will change like a section and then charge students for the next year's model. There are just so many things about college and student loans and all that that's kind of lumped together that I'm not a huge fan of. And I went through it and like, I get it. I've paid back my, I think, fair share. But would I say, hey, forgive some? Sure. Would I say make it completely easy and free and all that? Probably not. But it's like, I've had enough. So. But that's me. That's me on student loan forgiveness, man. I could go on about that for days and days and days because it was a scenario that, you all were fed propaganda, and it said, "Hey, school is just going to make it life easier on your children." And it's a scenario that, would I change what happened? Probably not, but I definitely wouldn't tell people, "Hey, you need to do this," because it's the gravy train. Because unless you're going into like a STEM field or something like that, I would not suggest it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but
That makes sense.
what do you think about student loan forgiveness?
I hadn't really thought about it. My student loan was about $7,000.
Sure.
Of course, I went to school with Fred Flintstone,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
yeah. But it would have gone on. It would have gone on for a long time. At $50 a month or
Sure.
$100 a month, it would have gone on a long time. I don't know. The taxpayer, is going to pick up the tab for that at some point. So, I don't know. I think it probably could be restructured where it's not They could take the gun out of your back
Maybe.
and you not have to pay so much money. There is
Yeah.
there is a limit or a cap on things, or should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is, the amortization chart and all that kind of stuff where they get into that. It's like a house loan,
Yeah.
where you're paying, the first, if you're going to pay over 10-year period,
Mm-hmm.
your first 6 years are interest, and you don't start hitting that
Right.
principal till,
Well, you don't
year
start hitting
six.
the principal like full on to where the scale, is tipped radically in the
Right.
other way. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and one thing, one thing to look at as well is you're talking about amortization charts and whatnot. Like the interest on these sorts of things are just outrageous. And
Yes.
I think what they have now is, I forget if it was an Obama era thing or not, where if you pay on something for 20 years, then they'll forgive it. And it's like,
Wow.
I'm not paying on anything for 20 years, not even a house,
Right.
if I can help
Right.
it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Sure.
So people, I saw an article yesterday or the day before that said you should still be paying off your student loans even during the pandemic pause. And I was like, well, I paid off 2 of them with some people's help, and it was fantastic. But now that there's light at the proverbial end of the tunnel, I mean, I'll take 10 grand and just say, cool, it's done. Awesome. Thanks. Like, I think I've done enough.
Right.
Because if not, the payment period ends, I think, on 2023 is when the air quotes final thing would be
For
collected. Yeah, for mine. And
Okay.
but now that's not with any pauses. However, paid on mine as during the pandemic, took some of Grandpa Joe's money and put it to that, right, which was very helpful. So I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, student loan forgiveness, I'm up. I'm for it. Sadly, if it affects me the best way it can, but I don't think that 50 grand is necessary, especially
Right,
for people who
right.
are in graduate school or somebody like that who you did the 4. Well, now you have to take another 2 or 3 because your degree isn't useful, so you now have to go and teach it to other people. That was kind of
Right.
like what the meme online where somebody did Egyptology, right, or archaeological stuff. Well, then there were no jobs, so then they went back for their master's and their doctorate. Well, then they became a professor, and they never did a lick of any of the actual work. They just made it so they could teach it because there were no jobs
Right.
for it. So stuff like that is just kind of wild. But is
Well,
college necessary? I don't think so in the slightest. And I think nowadays more than ever, it's being made more less and less necessary. I'll say.
well, on that same note, what do you think about the states that are opting out of the federal money, the federal unemployment money, federal unemployment benefits, the extra money that they're giving people, and in some cases they are making them go out and search for a job and bringing back. I remember back in the day in Tennessee, if you were drawing unemployment, you drew unemployment for 26 weeks,
Yeah.
but you had to go out and look for a job because people would come into our places where we were working and apply for a job. And we filled out this form, the name and address of the business and all
Sure.
that kind of stuff, and our name of who they talked to. They had to go in and present that
Yeah.
each week at the end of the week, back when jobs were a little more scarce. There wasn't now hiring on every corner.
Well,
Right.
man, nowadays, yeah, there's a now hiring thing everywhere. And don't let me forget, we need to talk about the gas thing. I have a story at the end for that
Okay.
because that was nuts today. So states giving or opting out of something from the federal government. I think it's good that states aren't taking extra money when they don't need to, if they don't need to. Okay. Because we have to understand, at least depending on how you feel politically at the time, are you a libertarian, conservative, liberal, whatever? Large government and having their money means they have control, right? So if the states want to
Right.
give back that money or give back the option and say, no, 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 I'm good, then that's fine. However, we need to understand that if those places want to be like that, that's fine. But they have to understand too, if people can move and they are wanting to and they get out, and then you have a scenario where other places are losing representatives and whatnot because the population is decreasing, much like we saw with California and a few other states, that, well, that's just going to happen. I don't really mind if Montana does something because I don't live there and it's awesome. I live here in,
Right.
in Tennessee. So
Right.
when Tennessee starts doing that sort of thing or does something that affects me on a personal level, like in my house kind of thing or down the street, yeah, I'll say, oh, okay, what's going on here? This is kind of wild. But if it's other places, I mean, whether or not it be red, green, blue, purple state, whatever it is, they can do what they do because luckily we live in, or I say we, me and the mouse in my pocket, live in the United States of America. And it's the United States, but luckily each state can govern themselves to a degree that that's what people signed up for in that state, right? They elect their
Right.
officials, they get their people in and or out, just like we saw with the school boards earlier. If they want to get those folks out, they can get them out. You know,
Right.
they can
Right.
primary somebody in a heartbeat nowadays, I'm sure. So if the people who are making these decisions, if the state men and women are okay with it, perfect. Let's go out and get those jobs. But if it's sparking something where they're opting out of the benefits to help businesses continue propagating a poor environment, poor pay, poor benefits, and all that stuff because folks have to take those jobs or else they'll starve to death, that's not a good thing. And that's really crappy if that's what the states are trying to do.
Well, I was making a comment today to Pat, and I said, we're going to make you go back to work, but you're not going to have any gas to put in the car to get to work.
Oh
So,
man, the
so
gas thing, dude, is wild. And yeah, I thought about that too. That's one of the things I'm gonna bring up to my constituents at work and whatnot. Is the gas thing. I have a story I'd like to share before we cap it off here. Is
okay.
oh yes, look at Rosie back there. So Gina told me like, hey, she says, hey, you might want to go get your tank topped off because there ain't no gas.
Right.
And
Right.
I think I went to, let me see, so or at least passed by and saw the little bags,
Okay.
over the nozzles, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it was 7 or 8 before I
No
found
kidding.
gas going. Yeah, before any place had anything other than say diesel, because that's all you saw in there were trucks or Volkswagens with diesel engines.
Right.
I found one, luckily in the city, that I was driving down Main Street. No, 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 no. And finally, on the way down New Shackle Island Road, there is a brand new, air quotes, brand new to me, BP that's down there on the left hand side of the road, like right after you pass Glenbrook. So where you turn in to get to the Kroger's and the
Okay.
Chick-fil-A and all that,
Right.
like 2 miles down the road that way ish, there's a BP that had unleaded, super basic only, no other kinds. And because I thought I was going to have to go out to the country store down there where I picked you guys up or picked up Rosie and you to go to
Yeah.
Ecuador.
Worships.
Right, Worsham's. Yeah, I thought I was
Yeah.
going to go out there. And that was insane. I mean, luckily it only took me
Did they have a
45
limit on
minutes.
it, or could
No,
you buy as much as you wanted, or
I got as much as I wanted, yeah.
okay?
No,
I
no,
didn't know
no
if they were
limits there.
starting to put a limit on it or how they were doing that.
They just let it all run out, man. Like every single place. So like when I hit place number 8, finally, it's all, 87 type or whatever. But, and it was $3 a gallon, $3. Luckily I didn't have to fill up the whole tank. And luckily I found some, but it is absolutely incredible that for one, now when you get gas back, it ain't like the price is going to go back down. So now
Do
you're
you
back,
think? Do
back
you
up to
think it
that.
needed to be like that?
Be like what?
But do you think that? How do you think they pull that off? Whoever supposedly hacked the Colonial Pipeline. The research I've done on it, whoever hacked the Colonial Pipeline, it's a ransomware kind of deal. And they had shut the pipeline down to make sure that these people didn't get access into their programs.
Mm-hmm.
But these people have done it so often, they have a help desk.
Mm-hmm.
Not the pipeline, the ransomware
Yeah.
thieves have
Sure.
a help desk to help you
Get your
pay
stuff
them.
back.
Yeah.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
like,
even if it's just
this is
automated or
excellent.
whatever. Well,
This is excellent. Yeah.
it's becoming like a sitcom or some kind of crazy movie or something like that. I don't know how they got in there, and I don't know how that one pipe is like really shutting things down, because to me, I could see where that pipeline would be pretty intricate, but
Right.
it would be very curious to me of why that's going on, because look at it like this. A state of emergency was declared because a ransomware thing happened to a pipe. So, I mean, it don't get no more American than that, as they say.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Well, you
like,
shut down the Keystone Pipeline, so if you'd have left that alone, maybe they could have rolled out some help or something
well,
that these people
there's no
thought they
guarantee of that, sadly. But,
Well, right. You're right.
well, and it's like, hey, is this going to force people to change? Is it, is this another thing that's changing the landscaping? Because I kid you not, the second gas station I passed and couldn't find anything and just found the bags over the nozzles and stuff, I was like,
Right.
man, a Tesla would be fantastic right now, because you don't have to care about that anymore, right? You just have to care about
Right.
your battery that you got to change out every so many tens of thousands or 100,000 miles or whatever. And it's like, oh, electric seems real good, because who doesn't care about gas? People who drive electric cars, and they just charge it from their house.
We started talking about that today, about
Sure.
still having the Expedition and the pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
Having both of those and having to fill them up at 8 miles per gallon.
Oh yeah, man.
So,
Ain't no way.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
absolutely no way. So it was something that, is the state of emergency there to gain control? Is the ransomware thing, was that staged or was it planned? Right? What is it? What is
It's
it
a
doing to
conspiracy
people?
theory.
Right. Yeah. What is it doing to us, thought wise and physically? Because going back to work, they're kind of wanting us to kind of target August, and it's a scenario where I'm like, well, now I could even say I don't have any gas in my car.
Right.
Are you going to send the, V. Alexander chopper? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Are you going to charter me a plane to get over there? I know you don't have a whole lot of jet fuel, I'm sure. So it's like, well, that's another thing to add to the pile of things, that the landscape has changed enough, and we have proven ourselves time and time again that we can do this, and that we want to, and things are going to change. So kind of cool.
Right.
I don't want to say, hey, fight the power or whatever, because we are the power. And it's
That's
like,
right.
we are the people, but
We're the leaders we've been waiting for.
that is very eloquently put. And do you have anything else?
I do not.
Alrighty, sir. Well, this has been the Jaye and Thomas podcast, and we will catch you all